friend here too. I've gotten used to this guy. So the yellow reminded me this morning of our church plan in the inner cities of Tulsa called Story Church. The color scheme is yellows and golds, kind of like light, and it reminded me that Josh took a few email addresses from you last week that wanted to receive our weekly email newsletter. It's a one-pager. We don't bombard with stuff. If you missed out on that and would like to get it, or if you write down your email address and hand it to me at the end of the service. If you put your email down last week and didn't get an email from Story Church, I probably typed your email in wrong to the contact list. So come find me and we'll get it corrected. You know, I turned 58 years old 16 days ago. And I remember when I was younger thinking, all those people in their 40s, 50s, 60s, they've got it all together. They've got all the answers. You know, we would run to mom, run to dad. They had it all figured out. And you probably have similar people in your lives from when you were younger that you could always count on. And what I've come to learn is through, especially in the last couple of years and being here, that I still have those same thoughts. Am I doing this right? I have doubts, probably just like you. Those feelings never really go away. Yet I know the younger people are looking at me probably like I was looking at those older folks back then, thinking they've got it all together. And the truth is, it never really happens. It's kind of like, you carry the football for 99 yards and never cross the goal line, at least here on this earth. And so, I've come to accept that the phrase, there's a first time for everything, really doesn't have an age limit, because everything we do, at some point, we did for the first time. And so being able to fail and start over is a gift that Jesus gives us. That is exactly probably the greatest hope that he brought to the table. With Jesus, you don't have to have any experience at starting over. He just says, you can start over. Let's try this again. The church that we've been attending in Tulsa in the mornings when we're not here, our Story Church church plant meets in the evenings on Sunday to meet the needs of the neighborhood there. But we go to Memorial Drive Church of Christ, and their sign outside the front says, "Start over, follow God, experience life." Start over, follow God, experience life. And so that's just, that sign's not just for a certain group of people. I mean, that's out there for everybody to see. So that means you can start over no matter where you are. Start over, follow God, experience life. And I think they could add to the end, no experience required. Jesus picked a lot of first-timers. In fact, I think, the more I read, it seems like they were all first-timers at this. Most of them that were picked, they were picked to follow a rabbi. They were all adults for the most part. And usually the ones that were going to follow a rabbi were groomed. This is the family you can pick the next rabbis from. And those special kids got to go study early and all of that. And here are these average Joes, fishermen from all walks of life, and they are picked to follow a rabbi. Can you imagine what their parents were thinking? I mean, I'm sure they were proud, but it was like, this is very unlikely. And you got to wonder what the Jewish leaders and the teachers and the priests were thinking. These aren't the people that should be following a rabbi. When you follow a rabbi, you're training to be a rabbi for the most part. And I wonder if all of these guys were at a point, these disciples, the ones that were picked, the men and the women, were all kind of hoping for a do-over, a start over, but didn't really expect to get it. Because like I said, this is very unlikely in that culture. So I'm going to kind of do a speed round here, and I'm going to try to stick to the stories that I know you've heard before and the ones that are well known. So I'm going to call this the speed round of first-timers in the Bible. Simon, Peter, Andrew, James, and John. Those were the fishermen at the very beginning that Jesus said to follow me. And he even put a bunch of fish in their net to show that he was the real deal. And the same thing, these are the average Joe guys. When they went back home that day and told other people that they were asked to follow this rabbi, there were probably a lot of questions. It's like, you're not the guys that should be following rabbis. But yet they were thrilled because they had witnessed a miracle. They felt like they were supposed to do this. And I've always wondered, what would the fishing miracle look like at your job? If Jesus were to come right now, what would happen? In my job as a band director, I taught band for 32 years. I'm like, the clarinets are finally going to play in tune. Yeah, the clarinet. I won't have to worry about that anymore. And you know what? The trombones would quit emptying their spit valves on the shoes of the people around them. And what would these miracles look like? What would happen at your job where you would just literally step back and go, wow, something that's going on here? Matthew, he's the guy that he's sitting there in the tax collector's booth, and it's very simple. Jesus comes up and says, "Follow me." He goes, "Okay." It doesn't really say anything else. There's evidence there that Jesus ate with him. He ate with him at his home. He ate with him in most likely places. But, tax collectors, they were the enemy of the people. Okay, and even, in the tax collector's booth, there was usually a Roman soldier right nearby in case people got amped up about this. So these were not people that were in the favor of the masses of people. But, those guys were well paid. So, what was it like for Matthew to walk away from a great paying job to follow somebody he hardly knew? I got to think that he's been thinking about this ahead of time. He's got to be thinking, man, this is not good. I need a do-over. Can I please have a do-over? Can I start over? Can I follow God? Can I experience life in a brand new way? And I think he was probably worried because he wrote everything down, and it ended up being the first book of the Gospels. And I was probably thinking, I've got this tangible thing. I got a good paying job. I'm going to kind of document this thing in case it goes wrong, and I can go back to the authorities. And it ended up being one of the most important books ever written in the Bible. Now, another tax collector, you probably heard this story, Zacchaeus, the little guy. When I think of Zacchaeus up in the tree and he wants to see Jesus, he's desperate. He's a tax collector too. The people hate him, and maybe he's just like thinking, maybe this guy can help me out. I've been hearing things about him, And every time I heard the Zacchaeus story when I was a kid, I was like, I remember the first time going to Six Flags over Texas, and little guy. My dad was 6'3". And there's just all this stimulation everywhere, just roller coasters and stuff. And I said, Dad, I can't see. There's crowds. And so finally my dad would put me up on his shoulders and I could see everything. It was the coolest feeling ever. I wanted to see something and I just needed to get to higher ground. So Zacchaeus, he was desperate. It was like, I've got to get somewhere where I can see this guy and find out what's going on. And you know how it ends. Jesus knew Zacchaeus was there. He said, get out of that tree. We're going to go to your house and have a sandwich. And people were like, he's going to eat with a tax collector. On the list of people not to eat with, this was probably in the top 3. People that were sick, people that were lame. If you were sick back then, if you had like a permanent disease, it was probably because of something you did or something your parents did or something your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandparents did, and you were being punished for it all through your family history. You had to stay away from those people. So not only are we talking to a tax collector, we're eating with a tax collector at his house. What in the world is going on? And all I can think is that Jesus is here. He's stepping into these stories to people that are begging for a do-over. Can I just start again? I want to follow God. I want to experience life. One of my favorite stories is, and it's probably my favorite message that Josh has preached since he's been preaching here as well. When the story of the paralyzed man who had some friends who grabbed his mat to take him to Jesus to be healed. but they couldn't get in. I mean, they were in a house somewhere, and there was a huge crowd, and people were sticking their head in through the windows. The room was full. So they got up on the roof and dug a hole and lowered him in by the four corners of his mat. And I never considered at that point that, well, I thought about the paralyzed man and him being healed, but I never considered that this guy had four friends that would take care of him and would do anything to get him in front of Jesus. So I got to be thinking the paralyzed man is definitely hoping for a do-over. It's like, man, this paralyzed stuff, this isn't good. I got to be thinking those guys willing to lower him in were like thinking the same thing. Man, this is my chance for a do-over, to start over. You know, despite all of your faults and my faults, what is it like to have four people in your corner that can help you get to a better place? And I remember Josh asked, he said, who are your four? Are you part of somebody else's four that would pick up your mat and carry you to Jesus? You know, after Jesus died, was resurrected, returned to the Father, the book of Acts is all about the first church. And this is one of my favorite stories. Peter and John were going into the temple post-Jesus, and there was a lame man. Again, his friends had moved him to the temple gate. It's called the Gate Beautiful in the Bible, and put him there so he could beg for money. And it seems the same thing. You know, his friends were willing to at least get him to the gate to beg for money. I'm guessing they didn't have any money to help him with, but at least they got him there. And I remember 2 years ago, I went to Jerusalem with my mom, and we sat on the South Temple steps. There are still a few steps that are still there. And one of the leaders of our troop read a story as we looked out to the south, to the valley, a wonderful thing. And I took some pictures, and after looking at the pictures and the descriptions of where the beautiful gate was, I realized we were sitting on the steps about from here to that wall to the actual beautiful gate. And the architecture is still there. It's covered up a little bit, but the archway is the same. There's about half of the arch. And I did some more research, and that's where most people believe the Gate Beautiful was. So these people put the man there, and he begged for money. Peter and John said, we don't have any money, but we can give you something better. And they healed him. So I'm wondering, the Zacchaeus story, which if I didn't say earlier was in Jericho, which Jericho to Jerusalem is like going from here to Verdigris. Okay, it's a pretty decent length. It takes probably 45 minutes to drive there just with all the heavy traffic. But it's probably hikers have hiked it in the way that Jesus might have. It was about an 8-hour hike. So basically a day's hike away. You've got somebody with more money than he needs who Jesus helped. And another guy, after Jesus was dead, who had nothing, who Peter and John, with the help of Jesus, healed. It's just crazy to have light and darkness that close to each other. Another one you probably remember, the adulterous woman. I've always wondered too, why aren't we talking about the adulterous man she was with? There was a little bit of favoritism there, unfairly. And she fully, the adulterous woman was brought to Jesus, and it was to test Jesus. And that's where he said, those without sin can cast the first stone, and they all walked away. And he told the woman, now go and sin no more. She fully expected to be dead within 20 minutes, I'm sure. Everybody had a rock. She'd seen it happen before. Have you ever expected a harsh punishment and gotten grace instead? Did that change your behavior? It would change mine. I'm imperfect, as are you, but grace in the right moment is life-changing. And one of my favorite stories ever, I got to Owasso High School in the fall of 2004. Josh Atzett, who had not met yet, graduated Owasso High School in the spring of 2004. So I narrowly missed him. I could have actually been a teacher of him at Owasso High School. But the best story ever is, right now we've got emails at school, even where I teach now. We'll get emails. I teach ninth graders at Will Rogers High School. And there'll be an email go out. Oh, man, we got this 8th grade kid coming up. Oh, he is a hot mess. Here's his name. Be ready for him if you get him on your roster next year. That's what went out about Josh Adsett at Owasso High School. Everybody who had him in 8th grade sent emails out, and they labeled him. And let me tell you, I believe every bit of it. I mean, I've heard the stories. I mean, he was a terror. He still is a little bit. Very energetic, as you can tell. But Mrs. Harris, no relation, was his 9th grade English teacher. Had said on the first day of school, Josh, come here. Been reading a lot of emails about you from the 8th grade center, and I don't believe a bit of it. We're starting over right now. And it changed his life. He grew up a lot that day. What's the Grinch? His heart grew 3 sizes that day. That was Josh Adsett. He'll tell you that story, and tears will still well up in his eyes when he tells it. I can only imagine how that adulterous woman felt in that moment and how her life had changed. And finally, Josh last week preached about the demon-possessed man. They went across the lake, and as soon as they got out of the boat, this crazy guy with all of these evil spirits and demon possessions came running towards him. And, Jesus ended up sending the spirits into the pigs, and the pigs jumped over the cliff. And though they were happy for the man, part of their economy just went over the cliff as well. But the way he painted the picture was the part of the story that we missed, is that man was running towards Jesus. So something in him knew that Jesus could save him. So I ask again the same questions that Josh asked last week. Who are you running towards? Or who are you running away from? Are you hoping for a do-over? That man got a do-over. So I got to ask now, the second question really after all these stories, there are a lot more. If you've read the Bible, there are a lot of stories of these first-time people that were wanting a do-over. And I'm wondering if while they're asking if they could have a do-over, is there a way to have a do-over? Are they also making this statement that there's got to be more to this life than what I'm living right now? And maybe that's why I need a do-over, because maybe I don't know what this more is. I remember growing up in Arlington, Texas, and I was part of I went to First Christian Church in Arlington, Texas on Cooper Street. I got my churches mixed up. I'm going to correct that again. Not that you're going to get your map out. Collins Street. And there was a church plant that came off of this church called Rush Creek Christian Church on the south side of Arlington. It's still there today, and I still consider it my home church. And I remember when I was a kid in the youth group, on a Sunday morning during the service, that a man got up, and I thought, this is one of those older guys that has it all together. Remember those folks? Turns out he was 35, but I was 16 years old, so that seems a lot older. And I remember him talking, and he was awesome. I'd met him a couple times before, and I didn't know them well. But he said, after telling his story, he goes, I just woke up one morning and said, there's got to be more than what this life is offering me right now. What am I missing? So he studied and was baptized, and he began to follow Jesus. And he found his more. He found the more in there has got to be more. So, did Jesus choose people that were looking for a do-over? Were they the best people? We don't really know. We all know that their lives were changed. We also know that they were confused and didn't understand most of the time. Maybe nobody had ever given them a do-over before. Maybe it's like, you do this, you get this, black and white. Maybe there was never another chance. So I ask now, what do we get when all of these first-timers start asking all those same questions or making the same statements? Can I have a do-over? There's got to be more than this. Just this morning, I got on my phone. Bad habit. I wish I could get rid of it. But I just happened to find an ABC News article that was posted yesterday about church statistics. In the 1940s, 80% of Americans said they went to a church, synagogue, mosque, or temple. They were worshiping something in some religious context. Today, 80 years later, 45%, less than half, say that they go to a church, synagogue, mosque, or temple in the United States. And also today, only 32% worship in a house of prayer once a week. So think about it this way. If you've only got 2 people in your row, just imagine somebody. If you look left and you look at right and you look at yourself, only one of you is going to church in the United States. 1 out of 3. So what is going on? First-timers tend to have a lot of questions. I've mentioned the fact that my daughter has the context of, early 20s in her generation. She can see things that she deems to be inauthentic or lacking in authenticity from a mile away. She's got incredible insight in a way that I wouldn't have thought of. And I'm wondering if maybe people they want to hear what they can, what's the good news that they're going to get, then what is the bad news if they don't take it? Maybe that's part of it. Maybe people are hoping for a do-over, but all they see is fear-mongering, condemnation, transactional economy within their faith. Our church planning group, we've got the Story Church, which you've heard about. It's part of a church planning group called 242. It's about the first church. It references the first church in Acts chapter 2, verse 42, which reads, "They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, to the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. All the believers were together and had everything in common." And this next part I want to highlight. "They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. Every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." People that were living that way. My possessions are your possessions. What do you need? What do you need? How can I help you? That was pulling people in. "And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved." That's what the scripture says. That is the model of the first church that we are striving for. And then if you go back to the beginning, to the story we all know, Moses leading the people out of bondage, out of Egypt, and all the hardships they had over many, many years. He gets them out of slavery, takes them out in the desert, and what's the first thing they do? They complain about the food. We could at least have had a hamburger and some fries back there in Egypt. Right now, we're not eating much. And so God provided manna. And if you remember the manna story, God said, "Take what you need for today. If you take any more than that, you will not have it." And so they tried that. They would take, they're hungry, so let's take enough for today. Well, let's take a little bit for tomorrow just in case. And what they took that was left over the next morning had maggots in it. And if it was the day before the Sabbath, they could get 2 days worth. So that, because of the work, not working on the Sabbath and resting on the Sabbath. But other than that, the food would go bad. And so, take just what you need. Acts 2:42 says, "Give to those who have need." Is this the model that will bring people in? Again, look to your left and your right. One of you, only one of you is going to church right now. Is this the model that will bring people back? Or, in today's context, bring them in for the first time? Or is this just too uncomfortable? Is this, take just what you need, Give to those who have need. Is this what real church is? Author John Mark Comer said, if we're not being intentionally formed by Jesus himself, then it's highly likely we are being unintentionally formed by someone or something else. If we don't make Jesus first and the ways of Jesus first, that means something else has our attention in a greater fashion. Intentional formation. If you're not sure what that means, formation is what are the things that are around me that are forming who I am. Who's influencing me? What is influencing me? What's influencing you? Who is influencing you? Intentional formation. It's the model of Story Church in Tulsa, where we don't put a whole lot of time in on the Sunday service. We do sing, and we have a message, and we take communion, and we pray. But we're focused more on the other 6 days of the week and what we can do in the community and in the schools. The last story from the Bible I want to share is another story I learned when I was in Jerusalem, the story of Joanna. Not a lot in the Bible on Joanna, and it's probably the most unlikely of stories. Joanna was the wife of Chuza, who was the steward of Herod Antipas. So Herod Antipas was the king that Pontius Pilate sent Jesus to before Jesus came back and was crucified. Herod Antipas' father was Herod the Great, who back at the beginning of Jesus' life sent the wise man to say, hey, who is this Savior we've been hearing about? And he got very threatened, and he ended up killing all males age 2 and younger in the vicinity of Bethlehem to make sure that he got rid of Jesus. And the wise men he sent, they were supposed to report back, were like, oh, we don't want any of this. They went around and went a different way and never reported back to him because they were scared. And then when it was time for Jesus and his family to go back to where they came from and ended up in Nazareth, they went the route of Egypt. They went way west, followed the Mediterranean, and kind of curved their way around Herod's area. And isn't it funny that Moses wanted to get people out of Egypt to save them, and the way that Jesus was saved from an early death was to go back through Egypt. It's a crazy story the way it all turns out. And Joanna, her husband, like I said, was the steward. It basically means he was the household manager of Herod Antipas. So in other words, wouldn't you like to have a household manager, by the way? Somebody to just run all your stuff. Somehow, right there in the middle of all of this evil, she was able to find out about Jesus and ended up traveling and financially supporting Jesus' ministry. She was one of the women that was also claimed to have evil spirits that Jesus cast out. And in the end, she was one of the women that helped prepare Jesus' body for burial. How in the world did she pull this off? I mean, she's literally living in the palace where the king lives, who has been trying to kill Jesus and whose father tried to kill Jesus. I think she probably just woke up one morning and said, you guessed it, I need a do-over. I'm not buying this. There has got to be more. And so she found a way to use her resources to benefit Jesus' ministry. She put herself in grave danger. A few weeks ago, I preached on Nicodemus, that one teacher of the law who really thought he knew who Jesus was, and even though his colleagues were critiquing him, he went for it. He stepped away and accepted who Jesus was. And Joanna did the same thing. And it reminds me through my studies, Martin Luther King Jr. and Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian who helped bring down Hitler in World War II, both put themselves in grave danger by returning to dangerous places. And they both were shot and killed at the age of 39. So to finish up on first-timers, my daughter Claire is halfway through nursing school. She just found out she got a scholarship to help with her final semester and also applied for and received a job post-graduation at St. Francis, in the St. Francis healthcare system in Tulsa. It's been a happy time around our house. And, part of what she has to do is work with a mentor. She's a first timer. What if every job said you had to have experience required? Nothing would ever get done. I mean, my uncle was a farmer, and he learned it because his own father taught him how to do it. So mentoring is part of it. If we're doing everything for the first time, mentors have to be involved. So I ask you, whose corner of the mat do you have? Who are you investing in, and who's investing in you? There have been a lot of people invest in my daughter, and it's really paying off. And even at Will Rogers High School, I've been teaching 32 years. I'm a mentor for a first-year teacher, Mrs. Harrington, right next door. So I ask again, who are you investing in, and is someone investing in you? So I'm going to finish with a real story that is present now. There was a man who grew up in the church, was around it all the time, was never, one of those people that got into their 20s or 30s before they finally went to church. Church was part of his life. He went through the motions, was baptized, was in the church youth group. Life happens. College, family, career. And through being career-driven, this man became lukewarm on his faith. And one day he wakes up and says, is this all there is? There has got to be more. And the questions arose. He talked to two of his closest buddies once. He said, hey, let's get some coffee. What's going on here? What do you guys believe the way I believe? There was a lot of common ground. And then those two buddies that he had put faith in decide that they're going to drive halfway across the country and revive a church. And the man stays behind, but stays in close contact. And during COVID, this man didn't have a lot to do at work, got into seminary online and studied. And those two buddies said, hey, what do you think about coming to deliver a message at our church that we've revived in Merrimack, New Hampshire? And the man was like, oh, well, I'm really glad to be at this new place that I'm in, but I'm not sure I want to step up behind a microphone. But he did. The sermon topic was simplicity. So the focus of that sermon was to love God, love one another. The two new commandments that Jesus brought. And Jesus said, if you love God, love one another, it'll cover all the other ones. Seemed pretty good. 38 minutes later, simplicity seemed a little long-winded at that point. I remember that. But the man wondered if he would ever preach again after that and what God's plan was. And then there was a phone call. Seems to be there was a small church in northeast Oklahoma that needed a little help. And people from all around were getting phone calls. Could these people fill in for the longtime pastor at this church who had been here 57 years? So the man prayed, and he prepared a message on the importance of prayer. And on the morning of August 13th, 2023, got his wife and daughter and mother-in-law in the car and drove 45 minutes to Chelsea, Oklahoma, and delivered his second ever sermon. And over the course of the next 18 months, he would deliver 17 more. He would listen to his recordings on YouTube, try to make improvements, try not to go 50 minutes to an hour like his friend, whose name rhymes with Josh, goes every now and then. I told him I was going to do that. And the people gave him donuts, barbecue, and bacon. Everything has a beginning that comes from an ending. The small church, who you know who it is now, eventually hired a full-time pastor. The original man and his buddies started a new church planting network and planted a church in the inner cities of Tulsa, Oklahoma. And that 18-month period, both of these things were happening. God was moving here. Chelsea was praying for Tulsa. Tulsa was praying for Chelsea. And for 18 months, God moved through all of these people. And will continue to move. And the kingdom of God was uncovered in the most unlikely of places by first-timers in a small town and in the big city, just like Jesus planned it. Pray with me. God, thank you for right now, this moment you've brought us to. It's been a long journey for a lot of people in a lot of different scenarios. And there has been some pain in the waiting. But yet you have provided, like manna in the desert. You've said, this is just what you need today. No more, no less. We'll navigate tomorrow. And we are so grateful for where we are in anticipation of things we don't know yet, but faithful because you have been faithful to us. We love you so much and praise you for bringing us to this moment on December 29th, 2024. In your name we pray. Amen. Our hymn of invitation will be softly and tenderly. We would love to talk to you if you would like to take that next step.